As we're reading through the Bible this year, hitting different passages, today we come to a passage from Ecclesiastes. Okay, it's one of those words that you want to look at it and go, how do you pronounce that? But the theme today is wisdom. What are we living for? Are we living a life that is full of wisdom so that we get out of the bed in the morning, we know how to live that life that we have that day? There are many reasons that people give for their purpose in life. If we kind of go down the whole spectrum, on one end you have hedonism. In other words, I'm just living for my own pleasure, whatever brings me pleasure. And actually just a slightly modified, softer version of that is our American dream, right? We're just trying to live a happy life and have all the things that we need that give us enough health and wealth and freedom and love and belonging and rest. And we kind of want to have it all. And so we kind of take that down a notch. But actually, when we're chasing even the American dream, a lot of us are just living for survival. We just want to make sure we have a happy marriage. We want our job that's not too grueling. We want our kids to turn out okay. We want to have enough money to pay the bills, enjoy life. We struggle with all these things. We struggle with our health. We struggle with being able to make sure we have enough for retirement and that we all want to die peacefully in our sleep someday. So a lot of it's just, this comes down to it. Most people are living on survival mode to some extent. If we kind of go the other way, altruism, we're trying to do something good for the people around us. We're trying to make sure their lives are well. We want to show the love and kindness as it is, and that's a great thing. And even going to the extent of globalism, we want to make the world a better place. So we're going to do everything we can to make the world a place that people can live in and live well. So, and not all this stuff's bad, of course, but are these the reasons we live, or is there more to it? And Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, says there is more to life than these things. Solomon asked God for wisdom, and God gave it to him. And actually, that's something we can ask for as well. We're told in James chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, if any of you lacks wisdom, and that's me and probably most of us here, let him ask of God, who gives generously, sorry that got cut off there, generously to all without reproach, and it shall be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. We can ask God for wisdom. That's a great way to start our day, and to say, God, give me the wisdom that comes from you to be able to face what's going on in my life today. Sometimes we need wisdom for certain situations and circumstances in our lives. We've got questions. We're asking God, do you want me to go here or do you want me to go there? How am I going to handle these certain situations? Solomon was commended for asking God for wisdom, and God gave him great insight into things. And we see those through the books of the Bible that he wrote, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. And our text today comes from Ecclesiastes, which actually means the preacher, because this book is kind of like a sermon. It's basically kind of like a deathbed reflection of life. And this is what I've lived for, and this is where I figured out what life is all about. Now, we don't want to figure it out when we get to the end of our life, right? We want to figure it out a little bit earlier on there. And so he wrote this book as kind of like a sermon to say, this is what you can expect from life, from a life of wisdom, because I've been there. And so it's interesting because as I was studying this, I always had this idea that God just like infused, Solomon with all this wisdom, and he just always knew the right thing to do. And he did in a lot of situations, but we also see that he did a lot of foolish things to try to get wisdom. Sometimes we learn through our mistakes. We learn through experience. And I think that God gave him wisdom. Some of it was probably infused inside of him, but some of it was like, let's take life and let's make decisions and choices and learn from what we do, both right and wrong choices. And I think we do that as well in life. There's some things that God just gives us innately, but there's other things sometimes we have to step out there, and when we do the right thing, we realize, oh, that was a wise thing to do. Or when we do the wrong thing, we go, oops, I need to take a step back and do this over again when we have the chance. So I was just thinking about that this week as I was preparing. And Solomon says, I've seen it all, I've done it all, and this is what I realize is what really, really matters in life. And as we get to the end of the book in chapter 12, we read, he says, this is the end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. I didn't ask the permission, but I'm going to use our guest as an example here today. They wake up every day with a purpose that they shared here today. They said, we're going out there to make God known to the audience that God gives them to be able to do. And they probably have some skeptics. Has anyone ever said to you guys, you need to go out and get a real job? Okay, they're nodding. Okay. You know, there's a little boy that told his mother, when I grow up, I want to be in a band. She replied, you can't do both. There are skeptics from the other side saying, you can't go into public schools. You can't push that religion on people. You hear that, I'm sure. You know, like, what are you doing there? You know, how shameful that is. There's probably a skeptic inside of them that says, maybe I should be home tonight. There's someone there that needs me more than I do. You know, there's probably also just that I'm tired. You know, we've been doing this and sleeping again on the moving vehicle. So there's some struggle inside, you know, to be able to do it. But yet there's a purpose that keeps you going. And they share that very, very effectively here today. You know, that they get up every morning and they say, this is what God's put in front of us to do. And most of us don't have to get on a van and travel around and do what we do, but God gives us a purpose every day to do the same thing what they're doing, being called to reach the world around us, to the audience that God gives us, each of us, even if we don't have to drive 900 miles to get there. So we are all doing that and aiming for that we put God first. And that's the greatest sense of wisdom, is to put God first. You know, it says fear God, not a God that, not a fear that makes us cowards, but a fear that makes us respect Him and His authority and His place in our lives, to be able to lead us and guide us and to let us know what's right and what's wrong. As little children look to their parents in that same kind of respect, you know, we look to God, our Father, in that sort of respect as well. You know, fear is a good thing when we don't put ourselves in the center of the universe, which we're so tempted to do, but we let God be the center of the universe and everything revolves around Him. And that should put a little bit of tremble in all of us. In keeping His commandments, you know, you say, well, we live in the age of grace. You know, it doesn't matter. There's even people out there saying, well, all the laws of God don't matter and stuff. But, you know, the civil laws, the religious laws that there don't really matter now. But God's moral law is true from the beginning to the end. And His moral law, His commandments are true for us, and they're good for us. And there's something that we can keep, not because of our own righteousness, but because of the righteousness of Jesus Christ. Because He was the one and only true commandment keeper. We've broken Him right and left, but He kept it. And we are in Christ. We are in His righteousness, and we can stand before Him. Not in a cowardly fear that He's going to punish us for what we've done wrong, but with the grace and love of Jesus Christ, that we're clothed in His righteousness. And that allows us to be able to keep the commandments of God. We are clothed in Christ. If I came in here today wearing swimming trunks and a Hawaiian shirt, you would say, you need to head to the beach, right? Because I'm clothed in the attire for the beach. If I came in here in a tuxedo, all dressed up, you'd say, you're going to some fancy event, not just to Sunday church. You know, what we're clothed in represents what we are about. And if we're clothed in the righteousness of Jesus, then we are able to be about the things of Jesus. And that's a wonderful thing to have as we strive to keep the commandments. This is the whole duty of man, because God knows everything. He sees the motivations of our heart, the secret things that are there. He sees all the stuff that goes on in our lives, and He knows, and He wants us to be able to keep these things in mind. And Solomon said, what we think, what we say, what we do is going to be transformed when we keep God's goal in front of us. Unfortunately, as I said, Solomon in all his wisdom made a lot of foolish choices as well. He had to learn some things the hard way. He, first of all, took many wives, even foreign wives that had different gods. And you can just imagine, not only was he polygamous, he became a polytheist. Because, yeah, he's got these wives that have other gods, and they're like, honey, could you, build me an idol for my God, you know? And he's saying, well, but they're not the true God. But, you know, they nag a little bit, and they kind of get to the place where he says, okay, you can have your idol over here. So that wife has her idol over there, and that wife has her idol over there, and pretty soon they're saying, honey, will you come and worship my idol with me? Come and pray with me at my idol. You know, and he's like, no, that's not the true God, but, you know, eventually, okay, I'll come in and I'll pray to your idol as well. And Solomon got off track of his very good advice here, that he finally realizes at the end of his life, this is what it's about. And there were many consequences to the things that he did, and that's a whole other sermon right there. But we can learn even through those that made the mistakes, through those that did things the hard way. And we can learn from them and not make the same mistakes, even as Solomon did. So when all's said and done, we have a God that knows who we are, and we get to know God, and we get to know what his will is for us. And we can ask for wisdom to be able to truly fear him and keep his commands, because that is the whole duty of man.